In Mocoa, Colombia, workers experienced something they could never have imagined. A giant 8-meter anaconda was among their tools and could have put their lives in danger. What happened? Stay tuned to find out. Mocoa is a beautiful area, a lovely city in the south of Colombia. It is the capital of the department of Putumayo and is close to the Great Andes mountain range. But it is primarily an Amazon region, surrounded by lush jungle landscapes and known for its unique biodiversity. It's a place where many species from both the Amazon and the Eastern Andes come together. In other words, it is a biodiverse area. How biodiverse? Well, it is home to over 50,000 species of flora and fauna, making it one of the most biodiverse regions on the planet. What brings us here today is a unique event that attracts attention because living in such an area means that the population is constantly in close contact with nature. It is common to see birds, reptiles, mammals and plants, many of which are unique to this part of the world. But that's not all. This area has also been affected by several natural disasters. In 2017, the Mocoa, Mulato, and Sangoyaco rivers, as well as the La Taruca and La Taruquita streams, overflowed, causing landslides and mudslides that led to a major torrential flood event. The city was severely devastated, with more than 330 people killed and nearly 400 injured, in addition to the destruction of homes, bridges, and vehicles. As a result, the city was in the process of rebuilding. The problem, however, is that living in a natural area like the Amazon requires special considerations when developing any type of work. This meant working with very specific studies and with Corpo Amazonia, an environmental organization that has worked hard to promote development and infrastructure construction without harming the environment. Their help has been crucial in the reconstruction of this site, as they require environmental impact assessments, EIA, to identify potential negative impacts before projects begin. This brings us to one of the cases in the construction and repair of some areas, where one of the companies, with the support of the government and the collaboration of Corpo Amazonia, had to work on the reconstruction of the areas affected by the tragedy in Mocoa. They were working in the southern part of the city, very close to the border with the jungle, where a large number of houses had been affected, so it was a very large area filled with different teams, each working fairly to achieve a complete repair. However, the terrain was difficult to access due to the rain, which made the task more complex. Workers used heavy machinery such as caterpillar excavators and heavy-duty cranes, some of which had reinforced structures to withstand the mud and heavy rains that constantly battered the area. A materials truck loaded with concrete blocks and steel was parked on the side of a dusty road, and there was also a tractor in the area clearing the ground, removing bushes and large rocks left by the landslides. All of this was being managed by one man, one of their most experienced operators, who was overseeing all aspects of moving and transporting the machinery. As he ventured further down the path, it became increasingly difficult to work properly, so he had to explore enough to guide the team correctly and continue with the repairs. But suddenly, he heard a strange noise amongst the machinery and objects. For a moment, he thought it was one of his workers tripping over something, but when he looked around, he saw nothing. However, the noise persisted, so he decided to investigate further. There were some fallen trees and objects left behind to allow the work to continue, and as he approached, he saw something that disturbed him. It was a huge, heavy body slowly wriggling towards the cleared area. What he saw was an anaconda. A dark green and black beast of impressive proportions appeared before him, its skin covered in dirt and red marks that made it look even more dangerous, and its fixed gaze caused a sense of unease. But what he noticed was that, mixed with the dirt, the red color seemed to come from the snake and looked like blood. Naturally, the man was frightened, and the first thing he did was to move carefully so as not to attract too much attention, as Corpo Amazonia had protocols for such situations. So he decided to take out his mobile phone and started to dial. Seeing the situation he was in, moving from one side to the other, some colleagues approached, curious. He simply pointed to the area and told them to be careful and to notice the creature. While on the phone, he spoke to the company's managers, who outranked him and were tasked with notifying the authorities, as an animal of that size with such an injury meant something bad must have happened, and they needed to be very cautious. If it was an animal that did this, it could still be in the area. When accidents like this happen in nature, many animals regroup and move to other areas, which was a cause for concern. However, the recent rains could also have caused the injury, as it was known that the Mocoa River tends to overflow during the storm season, and the strong currents could have swept the anaconda away, causing the injuries. There was also the possibility of a jaguar attack, as jaguars tend to prey on large snakes like the anaconda, looking for a feast in the water. That was the most worrying option, but the other possibility was that it could have been caused by humans, either deliberately or accidentally, as some hunters take advantage of the chaos to catch certain species, or it could have been one of his own cruise machines while they were organizing everything. All options seemed bad, so he wanted things to move quickly. He asked the rest of the team to keep working and not to make too much noise. The last thing he wanted was for a crowd to gather to watch. The best thing was for everyone to concentrate on their work. Soon, the company contacted him and told him to get in touch with the authorities as soon as possible. As it was impossible for them to get involved at the time, this worried the supervisor, but he decided to contact the authorities anyway to request a rescue. But there was another problem. There were more than 400 injured people in the city at the time, and they were still searching for more victims. Officials were busy, not to mention that some roads and bridges had been destroyed, and the Animal Rescue Patrol was tied up with the priority of rescuing people. The rescue team, like the police, was so overwhelmed by the chaos that they had to set up an emergency rescue center in an area called Barrio Olimpico on the outskirts of Mocoa, where they took all the animals. But their work was limited to small, easily transported species. The center was packed with specialized teams, all made up of professionals and volunteers who helped as best they could. The group included civilians who had volunteered, vets, biologists, and members of the environmental police, all working together to treat the animals, provide first aid to those in need, and ensure their temporary well-being. The streets were filled with dogs, cats, birds, and other small animals, many of whom had been displaced from their homes after the disaster. Rescuers moved quickly among them, seeking urgent care for the most vulnerable and affected animals. The police were overwhelmed in many ways and maintained a strong presence in the area, with teams of officers moving through the worst affected neighborhoods, searching for survivors and securing the area. Despite the time that had passed since the event, they had to remain very alert and on the streets responding to calls. It was during this process that they received an urgent call from a nearby area. "A snake has been found. It looks like an anaconda. It's injured and near the Barrio Olimpico. We need help." The information quickly reached the Animal Rescue Unit. Obviously, the commander of the patrol had to mobilize a large team to deal with this type of animal, and since they couldn't send that many people, he decided to organize a small but very well-selected team with the right equipment for the job. The team was made up of biologists, vets, and environmental police. The team included a veterinarian specializing in reptiles who was to lead the rescue operation. They brought with them all the necessary tools to carry out the rescue as quickly as possible. This included sturdy, ventilated transport containers, hooks and grips to handle the snake gently, and personal protective equipment to ensure everyone's safety. They headed to the site while the site manager briefed them, explaining what had happened as the team approached. Of course, they had to be careful, knowing that any sudden movement could endanger both the animal and the rescuers, so they tried to remain calm and alert, especially the keeper, who remained focused on the task at hand. On the other hand, the anaconda was in a helpless situation, trapped between fallen tree debris and mud, partially hidden, trying to move but struggling. Being such a large creature, it could have become stuck in the confined space. As soon as the team arrived, they began coordinating equipment and actions. They used some hooks to hold the snake without compromising its integrity or the safety of the rescuers. The vet carefully monitored the anaconda's behavior to make sure it wasn't overly stressed. Keeping it calm was a priority, so they did everything they could to make sure it didn't feel threatened during the transport. Fortunately, the snake showed no signs of aggression. It appeared to be exhausted, probably due to the intense rain, stress, and physical exhaustion that caused this behavior. After securing it in the correct container, the team began planning its transport to a safer location, avoiding high-risk areas and impassable roads due to the harsh weather. The transport was somewhat complicated as they had to maintain the correct conditions inside the container to ensure the anaconda remained comfortable during the journey. They knew that to help the animal recover, it needed to arrive as calmly as possible. Instead of going to the Barrio Olimpico, they decided to take it to the Amazon Experimental Center, a place that specializes in emergency reptile care. It had better equipment and experts who were better prepared for the situation. Of course, they notified the center in advance so they could prepare, and when they arrived, the team was ready to treat the wound. They immediately began to examine it, but the size was much bigger than they had expected. It was 8 meters long. The diagnosis confirmed that the injury had been caused by a severe blow, probably from a tree trunk dragged by the turbulent waters during the rains, or even a possible predator attack. What was clear was that they needed to be careful as the anaconda had lost some blood. Given the size and nature of the reptile, they obviously had to use some form of anesthetic to prevent pain while they worked. It was a risky procedure, with little blood, limited time, and such a large animal. The chances of success diminished as the hours went by, but after almost an entire night of painstaking work, the operation was a success. After that, the anaconda received constant care from the vets and biologists who took turns making sure the animal was well hydrated and fed, providing the necessary nutrients to help the snake recover as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, staff at the center kept a close eye on her progress, and as the days went by, the wound began to heal properly. After weeks of intensive care, the snake began to move with agility, which meant the treatment had been a success. As time went on, it became quite popular to visit the creature, attracting both tourists and local visitors. As time passed, the town was rebuilt, and things began to return to normal. In addition, tourism increased as some people were curious to see the creature during their visits, which also helped with the care and treatment efforts. Efforts were also made to encourage people to report any animals that didn't belong in the area as soon as possible, so that they could be relocated to safer places in this way. The region helped to preserve its wildlife. There have also been initiatives to prevent more animals from ending up in such situations, or to reduce hunting of the local fauna and biodiversity. Today, the area is fascinating to visit, and Mocoa is well worth a visit, of course, once the snake was fully recovered, healthy and deemed ready to return to its natural environment. It was released back into its ecosystem and taken to a remote area away from the city. So the work of the team, the builders, the caretakers, and the specialists was a complete success. Don't forget to subscribe and like for future videos.